Thank you for the introduction.
You're welcome.
So I'm going to see if I can share my screen. See if this technology will work for me.
Yep, we can see your screen perfectly fine.
All right. Isn't that great? Sometimes things work out. Okay, so let me get set here. So first of all, I'd just like to say hi to everyone. And thank you for this opportunity to present something I hope to be on an interesting and maybe helpful topic. But first, may I start with a story? About 10 or so years ago, I was speaking at a large Agile conference. It was being sponsored by Walmart in Martinville, Arkansas. It was themed Being versus Doing Agile. At the time, I was speaking about Agile at scale and, of course, the Agile mindset. I found it to be very energizing, and I made a lot of new friends. But what stands out the most for me about this time was one evening at dinner with several colleagues, my group's VP turned to me and boldly declared, I understand how this Agile can be, help companies be more adaptable. I am very intrigued about Scrum and Kanban, and yet I'm very perplexed in this understanding this Agile mindset thing you coaches keep harping about. Please explain it to me a way that makes sense and why it matters to me as a leader. Well, as you can imagine, in that moment, I did my best to channel my inner Michael Spade and Lisa Atkins to help me stumble through somewhat of an answer. And my answer did seem to partially satisfy the VP for the evening. As the story continues, a few days later, as we were traveling together to the airport, he admitted to me he remained unclear about what this mindset thing entailed and how do you change it, let alone why he should care so much about it. Well, I can tell you this triggered a moment of panic. The good news, for me anyway, it also triggered a 10+ year journey for me, one where I wanted to ensure that I could cover this question in a way that made intellectual sense and could be addressed in a specific way that mattered. To this end, the journey led me to an enormous set of insights about human interaction and change, as well as the realm of human and organizational psychology. The journey continues today, but today's topic is going to cover one of those discoveries, emotional intelligence, or EQ. To start, let's talk about smarts. In 1904, the French government asked psychologist Alfred Binet to help decide which students were most likely to experience difficulty in school. In his work, Binet invented the first practical IQ test, the Binet-Simon test. Voila, we suddenly could measure how smart every human being might be. This discovery, well, it kind of triggered a 100+ year belief that high IQ can predict a human's ability to achieve high success. Over the years, there have been many studies and modifications of or even versions of IQ testing, all in an effort to improve that test. And yet the statistics continue to show that IQ may or may not predict how successful one was. The data began to clearly paint the picture that something was amiss. Let me introduce you to William James Siddis. To this day, he is still considered to be the most intelligent human being to have ever lived. As you can see here, he was dramatically more intelligent than some of the most famous people we know in history and in today's world. Young William, at 8 years old, had mastered 8 languages: Latin, Greek, German, Russian, Hebrew, Turkish, French, Armenian. And just in case that wasn't enough, he also invented his own virtual language, which he called Vendergut. William became a sensation when he entered Harvard at the ripe age of 11 years old. By the age of 12, he was lecturing the much older students at Harvard on advanced mathematics. He was a magical wizard with mathematics, if you will. Wow, right? I mean, 12 years old and he's lecturing at Harvard? And yet I bet you, like me until recently, had never heard of William. Well, the highest IQ human who ever lived was also considered unsuccessful in terms of his potential. He died at an early age of 46. He spent his life working this magical mathematical genius as a bookkeeper, a lowly bookkeeper at the lowest levels. Whenever someone recognized him, he would absolutely quit his job and look for another. He did not like being around other people. He could not deal with the social limelight. And there is much debate today about his upbringing and how it might have impacted his ability to handle the social life in the limelight as an incredible genius. Because everybody at one point when he was in Harvard was talking about him, all of the news, everything. Of course, to make this point, I did choose an extreme case, but I am sure it meets the job as an example of high IQ, not being guaranteeing a predictor or leading to a successful life. I know all of you can remember occasions where smart individuals did not really mean success in the teams. And yet, many still unwaveringly, many leaders especially, believe that high intelligence will be the predictor of a successful person, employee, or even a team or teammate. Unfortunately, unsuccessful high IQ situations like William has happened enough that it did trigger many psychologists and researchers in asking, what is going on here? Something is missing. This is when emotional intelligence began to form, and we began to realize it takes more than just being smart to be a successful person. In the late 1980s, Mayer, Salovey, and Caruso began publishing research identifying the capabilities they considered foundational to emotional intelligence. In the 1990s, Daniel Goleman became aware of Salovey and Mayer's work, and this eventually led to his book, Emotional Intelligence. Mr. Goleman's book sparked a cottage industry on the topic. Goleman created an emotional competency framework that included both personal competency and social competency categories. Personal competency includes self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation, while the social competency includes compassion, empathy, and social skills. We now know that inclusion of this new discovery can and does predict success in a more stable and rational way than just IQ alone. It seems that being able to function in a socially acceptable way is critical to success. Amazingly, being liked is equally as important as being smart. There are many EQ assessments today that leverage Daniel's work. I personally am certified in the Multi-Health Systems EQ 2.0. It is what I know best, but please recognize it is not the only valid way to measure EQ. You can choose your own way. But using this model, I can describe a little bit about what is EQ and how do you see it. Collectively, the EQI 2.0 model of emotional intelligence produces an overall snapshot in time of one's EQ. The secret is the balance across the entire model. The model begins with the composite of self-perception. This is all about the journey you are on in life, having a clear understanding of your triggers and reactives. Self-perception is the ability to know oneself in regards to your values, goals, desires, concerns, what motivates you and what demotivates you, leading to a happy and productive life, whether personal or at work. Most importantly, it is the awareness of what triggers you into feeling unsafe and moving into a fight or defend mode or a reactive. Self-expression, this is the next area on the wheel, is the ability of knowing oneself, opening the prospect to express self in an honest and authentic way using just the right amount of independence and assertiveness. This can only happen if you are aware of your triggers and can capture them and express them in a creative way. This then leads to the interpersonal dimension, the ability to interact with others in a positive and productive manner, allowing you to connect without the clutter of self, being empathetic and aware of your social responsibility to others and the world around you, making your relationships more important than your fear and anger. That's critical. It's more important to have good relationships. This leads to the ability to make perfect and better decisions. Controlling your reactions, impulses with truth, real facts, understanding of what it really is going on in every interaction. Reality testing is a part of that. Your ability to clearly see the problem, opening constructive possibilities to solve all problems in a way that does not destroy those important relationships. All this then results in better stress management, becoming more tolerant in stressful situations, if you will. You become more flexible and tend to interpret events in a more positive way. And then once you become aware of and begin to improve your entire EQ spectrum, if you notice on the outside of the wheel, you will find that your overall well-being has improved, leading to a much more productive and happier life with your internal and external self, both at work and at home. As I am sure you are starting to realize, EQ can and does relate to improving the Agile mindset and individuals and interactions, resulting in better teams. First, let's talk about a case study. Does this stuff really work? Well, here is a case study related to EQ and its impact, and can be helpful in high-risk systems. And it was really related to the U.S. Air Force, and if you think about it, the U.S. Air Force has many high-risk, very high-stress jobs. One of those jobs is the Air Force Special Warfare Pararescue Jumper Specialist, or famously known as the PJs. What is their job? When an injured airman needs saving from a hostile or otherwise unreachable area, it is the duty of the PJs to bring them home. The PJs rescue and medically treat downed military personnel anywhere in the world, no matter the hostility or the situation, even if they are other elite fighting groups. Pretty high stress, right? You know, you can almost envision these guys, these PJs jumping out of airplanes, jumping in and saving the Navy SEALs. Pretty impressive people. Anyway, what was the challenge? Well, due to extremely high attrition rates across a number of their training programs, the U.S. Air Force needed to increase their recruitment efficiency so that they could see, well, some cost savings. In this particular example of the PJ's training program, they had to recruit 1,047 candidates to meet their goal of 90 recruits that could complete the program at the end. Think about that. In 2010, the training of one of these recruits cost about $250,000. With the high dropout rate in the training program, this came to a huge cost, to the tune of nearly $262 million to get 90 trained recruits. With the EQI 2.0 system, we were able to determine those most likely to succeed and most unlikely to succeed. Once the Air Force was able to eliminate those that were unclear or unlikely to succeed, they were able to increase their efficiency by 74%. And that related to a potential cost savings of $67 million per class. This was achieved by using what we call a star performer index, tailored to measure the EQ of the successful PJ trainee. What is a star performer index? It is the EQ profile that can be used to inform selection processes, evaluate fit against organizational culture, and result in increased potential for success and retention. Remember, training and coaching becomes more effective and can be targeted to emotional skills that are empirically linked to high performance. You know, I often wonder what a Scrum Master Star Performer Index would look like. Maybe someday we can find one. In the end, hiring individuals who are qualified and also happen to be emotionally intelligent proved to be a bulletproof strategy for the U.S. Air Force to successfully predict who will succeed on the job in the PJ area. It actually seems that selecting the candidates who have highly emotional intelligence for high stress, high consequence roles has been proven quite successful, if you will. In fact, the Department of Defense, if I remember correctly, estimates that that they're saving about $190 million annually once this program was fully implemented across multiple, training events and job roles. It wasn't just the PJs, but that was a lot of money. Wow, just from this one little thing, EQ assessments. So how does it apply to Agile? That's probably the question of the evening, isn't it? Well, in my opinion, the beating heart of Agile is centered on the idea of individuals and interactions over processes and tools and empowered teams. Through my years of experience coaching transformations, I have come to believe there are three key foundational components to high-performing Agile teams or higher performing Agile teams. First, the team needs to trust each other in the truest of senses. Part of that trust is feeling that each individual completely believes they belong in their team in a way that a team member values and cares for each other. It is a safe space to be. Finally, as a team, they feel that they can do anything together because they have each other's back, and together they will find a way. To achieve this nirvana team feeling, they will need to have high EQ as individuals on the team and as a system of individuals. The proverbial we, if you will. As coaches of teams, helping each individual and system as a whole to develop this high EQ is the center of the Agile mindset change that is absolutely mandatory to sustainable and successful transformations. Professional coaching is much more than teaching and mentoring. It is dealing with the whole human as an individual and how those individuals work and play in their systems. Without it, amazing, awesome, astounding teams that Agile has promised will remain forever elusive. The good news is that unlike IQ, we can dramatically change our EQ. That is, if you wish to do the inner operating system work that is required for the change. That really is the key. You can change your EQ, but only you can change your EQ. A coach can help you by using awareness exercises and directed accountability to change, but in the end, it is really up to you as an individual. I'd like to take a moment. Leaders, take a note here. There is a key question to ask yourself as a leader. If my system does not really support this type of change, will the individual on their own decide it is in their best interest to make this change? Can I truly expect Agile to flourish in the culture I have created as a leader? Okay, well, how about what can we do about it? How can I start? Well, here are 5 key changes you can begin with, and maybe improve your EQ with each of the steps. To start, observe how you react to people. Do you rush to judgment before you know all of the facts? Do you carry bias and baggage from the past? Do you stereotype? Look honestly at how you think and interact with other people. Try to put yourself in their place and be more open, accepting of their perspective and needs. Next, look into your work environment. Do you seek attention for your accomplishments, or is your work culture a hero culture? Humility can be a wonderful quality, and it doesn't mean that you have to shy away or be shy, or even that you lack self-confidence. When you practice humility, you can say that you know what you did, and you can be quietly confident about it. The key here is give others a chance to shine. Put the focus on them. Don't worry too much about getting praise for yourself. After all, great leaders, coaches, and yes, great teammates make others shine. Next, you might want to do a self-evaluation. Try out an emotional intelligence quiz or an assessment There's a lot of them that are free on the internet. What are your weaknesses? Are you willing to accept that you're not perfect and that you could work on some areas to make yourself a better person? Have the courage to look at yourself honestly. It can change your life. It can change who you are, and it can also make you a much better person to work with. Also consider maybe taking a 360 leadership circle, especially you leaders, to learn your natural reactives and how you can become much more creative in the way you interact and or lead. Next, you might want to examine how you react in stressful situations. This is as part of that self-awareness thing. We all have a reactive with every incoming event. Everything that's happening, our amygdala wants to react to it. And it does it very quickly, even before we make sense of what's happening. Do you become upset when there's a delay or something doesn't happen the way you want it to? Do you blame others? Become angry, even when it's not their own fault? The ability to stay calm and in control in difficult situations is highly valued in the business world and outside of it. Keep your emotions under control by being aware of your triggers and managing your self-expressions. When things go wrong, be in control. Ask yourself, are your relationships more or less important than you being right in the moment? What do you really have to lose? Next, take responsibility for your actions. You know, even with being aware, sometimes our reactive is triggered. And it's triggered in a negative way. And we might hurt someone's feelings. Well, in this case, first, we need to just recognize we are all human beings and we all make mistakes. So forgive yourself. But then apologize quickly and directly. Don't ignore what you did or avoid the person. People are naturally and usually more willing to forgive and forget if you make an honest attempt to make things right. Take accountability. And then the next thing is really talking about examine how your actions will affect others before you take those actions. If you are triggered, consider how your action or actions you're about to take will impact others. Put yourself in their place. How will you feel if you did this? How will they feel if you do this? Would you want that experience? If you must take action, at least remember, ask this question of yourself. How can I help the other human deal with the effects of my actions? So be careful with your actions. Sometimes we have to come across strong, but do it in a way that's going to be helpful, not hurtful. And then one of the great things you might want to do is really take a 360 EQI assessment. The results of this assessment will help you see how you perceive yourself and how it differs from how others perceive you. It's very insightful. It will give you that insight and awareness of what you can do to work on your inner operating system to improve your EQ. And finally, I have to say this, find a coach to help you with your journey. Yes, even coaches need coaches. Maybe even more so. Heck, I know I do. So, a shout out to my coaches and mentors. You know who you are. But in the end, I have to say, I believe that at the heart of Agile and the Agile mindset and value system, it all lies in the first Agile value: individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Consider for a moment how improving yours EQ or your team's EQ can create a truly powerful team using these 8 steps. As we come to a close for today, yes, I realize this presentation is high level. It's lacking a lot of detail. And yet, still, I hope it will entice you to go on a journey of your own. A journey of learning and self-discovery that will help you, your coachees, and teammates to be better Agile team members and human beings. But before I go, and we open to the QA, I have this intense need to make sure all of you know how much you matter to me. Every single one of you matter to everyone and everything we share this planet with. Everything you do creates waves of impact, changing history in real time. Even more important is sharing something that I have learned in my years of growth, that only I can design how I matter. For in the end, only you can choose if you matter in a positive or negative way. And remember, you can only help others design how they matter if you are consciously on your own, never-ending journey of self-improvement. Think about that for a moment. It's not just about helping others be more emotionally intelligent on the planet. It's also about your own journey to becoming more emotionally intelligent. And together, we all become better workers together. And maybe in a better place for the Agile mindset. Now, without further delay, I do thank you for your active listening and the quietness. But I will now turn it over to the Q&A, and I'll do my best to answer all of your questions. Thank you.
Feel free to unmute or type your questions in the chat box, whichever you feel more comfortable doing. I do know there were a couple, there was one question at the top. Laura typed, what kind of person was he? Was he a savant? I think that was for further up the beginning of your presentation.
What type of person was William Siddis? What type of person was him? Well,
yeah, he sounds like he was a savant.
Well, we really don't know that much about him because after he graduated from Harvard at a very early age, he kind of disappeared from life. He had some problems. He actually went to jail for a while. He was very antisocial. He didn't really like women very much. And so he didn't have a wife or a partner in life. He was a loner. We know all of these things. And it was really interesting because the man was absolutely a mathematical genius and a literary genius. He wasn't just one area genius. And so everybody expected him to be just astoundingly successful in life. And yet he hid in the lowest of jobs he could find all of his life. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Those are actually qualities of savants.
Yeah, we really don't know. I haven't read anything that said that he was a savant, but he definitely had problems. Quite frankly, what they believe it is related to the fact that his father was a psychologist and ran a hospital, and he tried to create William to be the perfect person from a very early age. And so they think there's more relationship to that than potentially any medical issues or disabilities or challenges.
Well, being a savant is not a disability. It's just a different type of brain. I'm not saying that it was.
I'm just saying that it wasn't related. They think it was more of the upbringing than it was any kind of other issue.
Yeah. Today we call that child abuse.
Yeah, potentially. I think there are a few people that kind of edged on that he probably was a bit abusive as a parent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what happened to Nikola Tesla too. His family was real tweaky as well. Oh boy. And he wound up having romantic feelings for a pigeon.
Yeah. And so I think the connection here really is that's important for us tonight is really the fact that he never really learned social skills. He didn't know or was capable of just working in the world in a social way, along with his genius.
Yeah, that's why they encourage a lot of times for parents to keep their kids in with kids at least relatively close to their own age group, so that no matter how smart they are, they can learn the social skills from their age group peers.
Sure, absolutely.
And it feels like you're holding the kid back in some ways, but yet you're training them to be a somewhat more normal human being. Now, another question for you, Carl, and Agile Expert. Are you going to be posting the PDF on the LinkedIn site?
If Carl shares it with us, I can email it. We will not post it on the LinkedIn site because we don't really have anywhere to post it. But if Carl is willing to share it with us, I will put my email in here. And anybody who would like it, I can email it to them. I will actually put my email and my LinkedIn, so whichever you prefer, I can send it to you guys. You can email me or connect with me on LinkedIn. And if Carl chooses to email it to me or LinkedIn it me, send it to me in LinkedIn, I can forward it to you guys that way.
Thank you very much.
You are welcome. So that is, we leave that up to the speaker on if he would like to share his slides or whatever. The recording of this will be up. It gets posted on our YouTube once our editing team is done with it, probably tomorrow morning, afternoonish. And the link will be posted in, usually it's posted in our chat. You also, if you're a registered attendee, will get an email of the link. So I guess the next question is to Carl now. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Carl.
No, that's quite all right. Yeah, I don't mind sharing the PDF. I can't share the slide deck, of course, but I can certainly share the PDF.
Carl, I have a question related to maybe an aspect of a person. So when you've been coaching and working with your teams, and I agree with the structure that you've put forth on your pages and the thoughts that are in there and how important it is and how one shows up and how interacts with it. But within the realm of a team being put together, have you witnessed, and then how did it play out when you have a true narcissist in the mix on a team? In theory, Agile says that the team will manage that person out. I haven't seen that really happen on its own. Do you have any experiences that you can speak with? Because that would greatly disrupt what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And quite frankly, I think that's one of the flaws of some of the Agile thinking, is that the team will just naturally take care of itself. Quite frankly, rarely does that happen. The dominators, the narcissists, the heroes of the team are always going to dominate the team. And then the rest of them will just go along, happily or not happily. They will never be highly productive. When I say never, obviously there are times when teams magically come together. But typically when you have a really strong personality person in there with a really high reactive and very low EQ, actually the team dealing with it is actually going to make it worse. And that's why they avoid it. The only real outcome is that person is either removed or leaves the team, is what my experience has been. So what I have personally done with people like that, not that it's always been successful, is, Brian, is to, try to get into a trusted advisory status with that person and try to create awareness for them of what the impact is of what's going on there, and why being a narcissist or being a hero or being the most important or the most smartest or the most in control, why is that so important to them? And digging into that reactive. Often you'll discover, like we were talking about a few minutes ago, it goes all the way back to childhood. Our reactives start when we're in our, before we're 5 years old. And we just validate that over the years. And we find a safe space and self-identity in that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Hey, Carl, we do have a question from our LinkedIn Live. Alex George asked, he said, Carl, I agree with your recommendations on good behavior versus intent, but there are numerous organizations that live in the past and are not amendable to change. In fact, they prefer their old destructive ways. How do you approach and work with such dinosaur work / company cultures?
Oh, that is a great question. And that was kind of where I was calling out a couple of times the leaders about their culture and what they're creating. You know, they're expecting these magical agile teams, and yet they build these cultures that are just so harmful, full of fear, full of baggage, full of, you know, just old stuff and the old way of doing things. And we really want to do that, but we want to call it something new. We want the benefits of what that new thing we're calling out, like Agile or any kind of Agile approach. So that's where I come into the critical part of where I learned that it was more important for me to learn how to speak with leaders and executives than it was for me to speak with teammates. And that's why I went on this big journey, quite frankly, Alex, is to learn how to speak to executives, learn how to speak to cultures, because you have to speak in their language. You can't speak in this wonderful agile world language that we have, that we all love each other and kumbaya. We have to speak in that meritocracy format. And when we get into that meritocracy format, we can actually make sense to them. So that's really what that question from that VP was in my group way back when. It was like, you know, I get all this stuff, but I really don't get what the heck it means or why it's important to me. You have to discover why this change is going to be important for them. If they're just going to hold on to the old way of doing things, it's because that's what feels safe for them. And they're coming up, you know, you've probably heard of the edge theory. They're coming up the edge of this cliff and they're looking across that edge, looking down at the bottom, and it has these big words on the bottom of the cliff that says, Agile, jump now. And they're like, yeah, why? Why would I jump off a cliff? So think about that for a minute. Do I have an answer, easily answered? It's not an easy answer, but hopefully this gives you some insight of things to look into. Did that help, Alex?
Hi, Carl. This is Sylvia. Circling back to what Brian was talking about. Can you guys hear me?
I can just barely hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me turn my volume.
Let me see if I can turn mine up a little bit here. Okay, try now. I turned it up more.
How about now?
That's better.
Okay, so circling back to what Brian was talking about, I totally agree with you on the solutions that you gave. There is this show that I was following up on Hulu. It's called The Good Doctor. And there is this surgeon, he is autistic. So he's not being narcissistic, but he's just totally being blunt because as an autistic person, he doesn't know how to navigate emotional intelligence. So, but when he got called out by the directors and tried to, talk to him, like, how do you think being blunt to your patient makes you feel, or how does he makes them feel? He tried thinking about it and he saw this and he started changing a little bit and started practicing on it. So I think your response on trying to call them out and talk to them about the impacts of their actions, it's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about the fact that most human beings really don't want to be evil. They don't want to cause harm. They want to be liked. Most of us really don't want to be the bad guy. We want to be the good guy. But in that adventure that we're on, where we want to be that good guy, we often think, and IQ is one of the reasons why, well, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then that makes me the good guy. If I can push through things and get things done, then that makes me good guy. What we don't understand is what makes me a good guy is what the idea that, people aren't going to remember how smart I am. They're going to remember how I made them feel.
True.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's kind of what the poll was about when we first started. It's really talking to that. What do you really remember about the person that you've worked with that you thought was great? Whether it's a leader or a teammate. What stands out about it? It usually isn't that they were the smartest person in the room. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, are there any more questions? Doesn't look like there's any more in LinkedIn. Alex did say it is a journey with capital is to your response. I did want to let you know that. Are there any more questions from anybody else?
I will have a question, but I'll follow up just on that aspect that was just being discussed. One of the things when I look at the question, Carl, that I have a tough time answering is because it's all of the choices indicate that the person did something that ended in a positive result. And I was hoping that one of the selection choices would have been something more of they were willing to engage and they would help find solutions. Doesn't mean you always get there, but that they're willing, because they always ended up that they were the smartest and they always did it all. It was always that person achieved the outcome, but it's not so much the outcome that I was looking for. So I don't know if you asked that question in the future, maybe if you would consider having that other little nuance in there. Because you don't always find the right answer, but are they willing to try and they work on it versus telling everybody, I've got the answer and this is what we're going to do? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. Thank you for that, Brian. In my mind, it was that type of person, you didn't notice that it was really that they helped you get the solution. You remember how they made you feel being a partner and that.
Yeah, that part's
working with them in an equal stance, right?
Yeah, yep. And then the follow-up question that I would have a little bit again with the dynamics, but it's a different kind of piece of the dynamic with a team, is that to get to this kind of nirvana place, do you have any insight on what you have observed in the duration that it maybe takes a team to get there? And when I say team, one of the big challenges that's often with the groups that I'm working with, they don't stay together as a team very long. So, B.W. Tuckman's group dynamic structures have highlighted that, if you change any member, then you're going to spend more time in the norming and storming phases. And so do you have any thoughts on where you've observed the positive and maybe, I know it's not one answer is going to solve for all, just maybe kind of a general guideline that if a team can stay together, when you might be looking or observing that hopefully they're starting to make this EQ transformation?
Yeah, that's a great question, but it's a little bit loaded, Brian, because here's the situation. As I said, each individual has to decide it matters.
Yes.
So even if the whole system at some level thinks, oh yeah, we all agree it matters, if there's one individual that's not going to care about it, that individual is not going to come along and the team's never going to hit that sweet spot.
Okay.
Right? And so you have to look at it as, how long does it take each of the individuals to make that journey? How much effort do you want to give to each one of them? Some individuals jump right away. I mean, I coach people that, like the very first coaching session, they're going, oh my God, I didn't know that was going on. I didn't realize that. What do I do to change? And we can create accountability and we can start working on it. And within a short period of time, they make some big changes, right? I always talk about the one big thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's the one big thing you want to stop doing? What's the one big thing you want to start doing? Focus on that. And so it's not boiling the ocean and becoming suddenly a superstar in emotional intelligence. I'm just getting a little on the journey because I think it's a lifelong journey. So that's why it's a loaded question. What you said, Brian, is I don't think we ever finish this journey. But
yes,
if we can just get everybody on the team to at least pay attention, realize that it matters, and then each individual just change one thing in the way they're interacting, in creating a better place to work with and being a better person to work with, I think that's where it is. And that you can actually do pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you.
We do have another question from LinkedIn Live. Kartik, and I'm sorry if I said your name wrong. In your experience, how easy or difficult generally is it for individuals to turn results of EQ assessments into a plan of action? How action which can improve EQ?
That's a good question. Thank you for that. When you think about that, what happens is most EQ assessments, I don't know about all of them, of course. I know the one that I'm most familiar with will give you a pretty detailed report about everything in your EQ assessment, as well as some suggestions on areas where you might want to work. They also typically in those assessments will ask the people that do the 360 some comments about you at a high level, saying, what would you change? What would you how would you make it better? So that they have some insight into not only the scoring, if you will, or the ranking, but also some deep insight into that it's this one thing that bugs the heck out of me that you do. So there's a little bit of a plan typically built into that, but that's also my point of get a coach. Because I think the coach is going to be able to read that, give you some kind of observations of what they're seeing, and then through conversation, they're going to be able to pull out of you what's really going on. Here's the problem. When we work on our own plan and we work on the plan that comes with the assessment, it's very surface oriented. It's not digging into what happened when I was 5 years old that caused me to get on this journey to be this type of a reactive person. Why do I think I need to be the smartest person in the room? Why is that the safest place for me? What happened in my life that made that my natural place to go when things get tough? Well, that's what a coach is going to help you lead through. And it's going to ask those kind of questions. And they're going to do that 5 why thing and drive you crazy. Well, why is that important? Well, why is that important? If that makes sense. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
All right, are there any more questions? I'm just checking our LinkedIn again. Anybody else have any more questions, Carl? It's been very insightful and very, very helpful.
Well, yeah, I hope I'm adding some value.
You are. I was trying to type this in, but I can't type fast enough.
Oh, go right ahead.
As an ADDer and ADHDer, in general, we are known to have, on average, ADDers have extremely high IQs, but notoriously, we have extremely low EQs because, well, especially with the ADHD, we make Tigger look calm. Heck, on my medication, I make Tigger look calm. Off my meds, I make him look comatose, the poor babe.
Wow.
And notoriously, it's the foot and mouth is not just an occasional event. It's a matter of routine because the mouth engages before the brain can take, is this really the best way to say that? It just, bleh, and it spills out. And so it's like the person was talking about the people on the autism spectrum. They see things as they see them. We say things as we see them. And it's sort of like, oh God, I just verbally marched all over that person and I didn't mean to. I just hurt all kinds of feelings and I didn't mean to.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and it's hard to fight the genetics.
It is, but you know, I have to give you some interesting data, Laura, and that is that when you look at neuroscience, the actual brain science behind all this, what you discover is that, yes, ADD really kind of pushes it out really fast, but the reality is everybody's reactive is the fastest thing, okay? Now, how rough we are or not rough, that's something that we learn in that reactive. Our amygdala, or what we call our lizard brain or ancient brain, reacts in very short milliseconds. And it takes quite a bit longer before our higher brain functions even make sense of what's going on. So our amygdala is saying, punch the guy, before your higher brain function says, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't punch the guy. That's not the right thing to do. Is that the right thing to do? That's that fight, flee, run away mode that we all react in.
Oh yeah.
That amygdala does nothing but react. Did you know as a baby, that's the only part of the brain that's formed?
Oh, well, yeah. I'm an MLT and a biotech, and I started off
there you go.
in nursing school at 17. And I was one of those kids that graduated. I did all 12 grades, but I was a year ahead of I was a year younger than everybody else. Sure. You know, classic high IQ, classic overachiever, classic, you know, put me in the, well, back then they weren't called AP courses, but yeah, advanced placement courses. Keep me from getting bored, because otherwise I'd fall asleep in class. But yeah, no, the amygdala is, yeah, it's the old hindbrain, but ADDers, and I've been learning about ADD, especially ADD and ADHD in women. We're a different breed of cat, and everybody has that, like you say, the amygdala kicks in and you've got that fight or flight, and do I punch him or not punch him comes in later. But that is a physical movement, yeah, barring the flare rage that ADDers are notorious for. But barring that, when it goes to speaking, we don't see how what we're blurting out is possibly hurtful. Even with the best of training, it's, you blurt it out and it's, oh, I wish I, you know, two things you can't take back are time and the words you just spoke. We're always wanting to take back the words we just spoke.
Sure.
And so, yeah, it leads to a lot of social isolation, which then makes the situation worse. And it's a spiral downhill for a lot of people. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm not an actual psychologist or
well, I'm not a psychologist either. I just have
or anything like that. So I want to be careful here in trying to address these specific issues like this. In general terms with EQ, though, what we're really trying to do, and I don't know if this is possible for you or not, but something you might want to consider is that's what the self-perception thing is all about, is learning how to capture those triggers. It might be harder for some people than others. I know it was pretty hard for me, and it's still hard for me sometimes, not to let my desire to be the smartest person in the room come out and become arrogant, you know, and being critical. What I have to do is try to notice when I feel that bubbling up in me and capture it. And once I capture it, that's when I can go to the next step of self-expression, because now I can go over there and say, before I'm going to express, I want to know what's happening inside of me. And what am I thinking? What's bothering me? Am I about to say something I shouldn't say? That really is that old saying. I remember when I was very young, my grandfather used to tell me, always take 5 deep breaths when you get angry before you respond. It just gives that brain time enough to say, okay, I'm mad. I'm really mad, and make sense of that, why I'm mad. But is that the right thing for this relationship? What I'm about to do. I hope that's a little helpful.
Yes, it is. It is. So I'm sorry to cut you off. I think what maybe Laura, if I understood what she was, saying is sometimes these people don't know that what they said actually hurt somebody. They were just saying it, this is the truth. So I'm saying the truth. And then maybe when someone gave them the look and they're like, oh, okay, maybe that did not come out right.
Mm-hmm.
That's when they realize that, oh, that did not, come out right. So I think with this, circling back to the movie I spoke about, I think the charge doctor asked the doctor to test on his colleague before he said it to the patient. So tell your colleague, and however he feels about it, then you will know it's right or wrong to say it to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is about trying to learn how to capture things. I know for me, I learned that I had to be the smartest person around to survive in the world when I was a little. I mean, think about it like this. You're this little kid. You're 3 feet tall, and you're living in this world of giants that control everything. They control whether you eat, drink, they control the candy, the ice cream, they control the punishment, the spankings, the whatever, standing in the corner. And so you're trying to survive in that land of giants, and you really haven't got a lot of cognizant skills yet.
Hey, Carl,
mostly reactive.
We do have, I don't mean to cut you off. We do have another question, and it kind of goes a little bit on what you're discussing. Sure. So I just wanted to not to cut you completely off before you went too far. We do have a question from Rudy, from our LinkedIn Live. It's how about actions and behaviors based on cultural differences and cultural norms?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question as well. Because we are, I know Bob Keegan, this is something you might want to look into, Bob Keegan's Adult Mindsets. And when you asked that question, it triggered that thought in me about how we are often in what we call a socialized mindset. And we're being driven by the tribal nature of our world. What's important to the people that we connect with. And even though we may think we're not so tribal or socialized in our mindset, we really do. We form our thoughts and our processes and our reactions based on how others in our tribe think we should. For example, when you think about what is success, that's a really interesting question when you ask different people and you ask different cultures, what does success look like? And you come up with all kinds of answers, everything from having love to having lots of money, having more things, having less things, but being happy, joy, all these different dichotomies, if you will, of what is success. Think about that when you're thinking about the reactives in cultures. Well, those ideas of success come from that socialized mindset for that tribe or culture that you live in. And so we have to be careful with that. If we live in a hierarchy culture, for example, the way we interact in relationships are going to be based on what we think is culturally acceptable in the hierarchy. 100 years ago, the way people thought is a lot different than today of what's socially acceptable and what's not. So it's not just culture, but it's also age. It's distance in life that we've been on. So hopefully that gives you an answer. Yes, there is something there. I can't really cover it all, but culture is very critical in understanding who are you working with. And if you've got a team, as many of us do today, that is globally diverse, you're dealing with lots of reactives that are normal in their culture, but maybe not normal in the other culture.
Excellent point. So I was reading a couple, everybody's just thanking you for the great session, and LinkedIn, I was just responding to a couple of them. Sorry about that. Does anybody else have any more questions or anything else? And Rudy has another question. He said, exactly, how do you use EQ in a cultural diverse team?
Oh, very good question. I think the key here is recognizing what cultural differences are there as a coach. And then when you start to apply that, be sensitive of that and make sure that the person, remember, this is an individual thing. And the individuals together create the system. So first you need to deal with each individual in their culture, in their EQ. And a lot of EQ assessments do take in consideration different regions around the world to help deal with that cultural differences. But the key here is then to make sure that they understand why it matters so much to them, and what do they have to lose if they gave up a little bit on that. Remember, I asked during the presentation, what do you really have to lose? Often we think we have a lot more to lose, especially culturally, than we really do. If we just take a little bit of a step back and say, wait a minute, maybe this isn't quite as important as I think. And so that's really that self-awareness, right? Is that triggering event. I'm being triggered, I'm capturing that trigger, and now I'm going to make sense of it in a little bit different way and thinking, well, what I'm doing, does that help my relationship or does it harm it? And in the end, what's more important to me? Me being right or my relationship with this person? And sometimes it's not the relationship, just so you know. Sometimes we got to say, I really don't want a relationship. That is a fair statement for every human being. Hopefully that gives some insight. I mean, these are all really great questions and we could talk all day about them. I'm trying to give quick answers.